I hope my abuser never gets out of their coma. The ventilator's rhythmic wheeze fills room 314, marking each breath that Richard Clemens doesn't deserve to take. I adjust his forward drip with practiced precision, my hands steady despite the familiar churning in my stomach that comes with seeing his face, even like this, slack-jawed and helpless beneath the maze of tubes and wires. How's he doing today, Sarah? Dr. Martinez appears beside me, checking the chart I just updated. The clock on the wall reads 6:42 a.m., and I'm 2 hours into what promises to be another 12-hour shift watching over the man who destroyed my childhood. Vitals are stable, I report, my voice carrying the professional detachment I perfected over 3 years working ICU at St. Mary's. Blood pressure's holding at 110/70. No changes since yesterday. What I don't mention is how easy it would be to change that. A slight adjustment to his medication levels. A momentary lapse in monitoring his oxygen saturation. After 6 years as a registered nurse, I know exactly which mistakes would look accidental and which would raise red flags during the inevitable review. Dr. Martinez nods, already moving toward the next patient. Keep me posted if anything shifts. His wife called again this morning, she'll be in around 9. My mother, who still believes Richard hung the moon and stars, who spent last night on her knees in the hospital chapel praying for his recovery while I stood in the doorway watching, remembering how those same hands once pushed me back into my bedroom when I tried to tell her what her new husband did to me in the dark. The accident happened 8 days ago. Richard was driving home from Murphy's Bar, his Thursday night ritual, when he wrapped his truck around an oak tree on Highway 9. Blood alcohol level of 0.18, nearly twice the legal limit, but somehow that detail hasn't dimmed Mom's devotion or her conviction that God will pull him through this trial. I pull up his chart on the tablet, scrolling through the damage: traumatic brain injury, 3 broken ribs, collapsed lung, internal bleeding they managed to stop after 2 surgeries. He's been unconscious since the EMTs found him, hovering in that gray space between life and death where I now hold more power over Richard Clemens than he ever held over 8-year-old me. The irony isn't lost on me. When I started nursing school at 22, I told everyone I wanted to help people heal, wanted to make a difference. I never mentioned that part of me was drawn to the knowledge, to understanding exactly how fragile the human body really is, how many ways it can fail. Sarah? Jenny, the day shift supervisor, pokes her head into the room. Your mom's here early. She's asking for you. Through the doorway, I can see her in the hallway, Linda Clemens, 53 years old and already looking like she's aged a decade since the accident. She's clutching that rosary she's carried everywhere since Richard's been here, her eyes red-rimmed but hopeful. Always hopeful, even when hope is the last thing any of us should want. I smooth down my scrubs and force my expression into something resembling compassion. In a few minutes, I'll sit beside her and hold her hand while she talks about miracles and second chances, about how the doctors are encouraged by his brain activity levels. What she'll never know is that her daughter has been measuring each of those encouraging signs against the weight of 13 years' worth of midnight visits and whispered threats to keep quiet. Sarah, honey. Mom's voice cracks as she wraps me in a hug that smells like her usual lavender perfume mixed with the antiseptic scent that clings to everything in this place. Thank God you're here with him. It makes me feel so much better knowing you're taking care of him. I pat her back mechanically, watching over her shoulder as Richard's chest rises and falls with artificial precision. Of course, Mom. He's getting the best care possible. She pulls back, studying my face with those worried brown eyes. You look tired. Are you getting enough sleep? I know working these long shifts and then worrying about family. I'm fine. The word family sits like broken glass in my throat. How are you holding up? Oh, you know me. One day at a time. She settles into the chair beside Richard's bed, immediately reaching for his hand. Her fingers stroke across his knuckles, the same knuckles that left bruises on my 12-year-old wrists when I tried to push him away. Dr. Martinez says his brain scans are showing more activity. His body's responding to stimuli better. I check his chart again, confirming what I already know. She's right. Yesterday his Glasgow coma scale score improved from 6 to 8. This morning it's holding steady at 8, maybe creeping toward 9. In medical terms, that's significant progress. In my terms, it means my window is shrinking. The prayer group at St. Anne's is doing a novena for him, Mom continues, her voice gaining strength. Father Mackenzie stopped by yesterday evening. He says miracles happen every day in places like this. I make a non-committal sound and focus on checking Richard's feeding tube. My hands know the routine so well I could do it blindfolded, verify placement, check residual volume, ensure the formula is flowing at exactly 65 milliliters per hour. Everything by the book, everything perfect. Sarah. Mom's voice drops. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. My pulse spikes, but I keep my expression neutral. What is it? Are you angry with him? About the accident, I mean. I know you never warmed up to Richard the way I hoped you would, and I worry that maybe you blame him for drinking and driving, for putting us all through this. The question catches me off guard. Not because she's asking if I'm angry, but because she's so catastrophically wrong about why. I wonder what she'd do if I told her the truth right now. If I said, Mom, I'm angry because he spent 5 years raping your daughter while you slept down the hall. I'm angry because when I tried to tell you, you called me jealous and dramatic. I'm angry because you married him anyway, because you chose him over me, because you're sitting here praying for the recovery of a predator who destroyed pieces of me I'll never get back. Instead, I say, I'm not angry, Mom. I'm just focused on doing my job. She nods, seeming relieved. Good. Because I need you to know that whatever happened before, whatever tension there was between you two, none of that matters now. He's fighting for his life, and he needs all of us in his corner. The machine monitoring his heart rate beeps steadily, 78 beats per minute, regular rhythm, strong pulse. I could change that. Tonight, when the hallways are quieter and the other nurses are busy with their own patients, I could make adjustments that would look like natural complications of his injuries. You're right, I tell her, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounds. He needs all of us. But what I'm really thinking is, he needs me to decide whether he lives or dies. And I have maybe 2 days to choose, The afternoon shift brings its own rhythm, and I find myself alone with Richard for the first time today. Mom left around noon to run errands, something about picking up his favorite pajamas from home, as if cotton flannel will somehow speed his recovery. The gesture would be touching if it weren't so tragically misplaced. I'm updating his fluid intake charts when I notice it, a slight tremor in his left hand. Nothing dramatic, just a barely perceptible twitch of his index finger against the blanket. According to his chart, purposeful movement would bump his Glasgow score to a 10, maybe 11. That's the threshold where Dr. Martinez starts using words like encouraging and significant improvement. I should document it immediately. Should call Dr. Martinez, alert the attending physician, mark the exact time, 2:47 p.m., in his progress notes. Instead, I stand there watching his finger twitch again, counting the seconds between movements. 12 seconds. 19. 8. My phone buzzes with a text from Mom, found his blue pajamas. The ones with the sailboats. Remember how he always said they reminded him of that fishing trip we took to Lake Martin, I remember that trip. Richard insisted on teaching me to cast a line while Mom napped in the cabin. His hands covering mine on the fishing rod, his breath hot against my ear as he whispered instructions that had nothing to do with fishing. I was 9 years old and already knew better than to tell Mom why I spent the rest of that vacation refusing to leave her side. Another twitch, stronger this time. His thumb jerks upward, a clear voluntary movement that any first-year nursing student would recognize as significant neurological progress. I pull out my phone and check the time, 2:52 p.m. 5 minutes I've been standing here watching his recovery unfold, 5 minutes of undocumented improvement. Well, I whisper, leaning closer to his face. Look who's trying to come back to the land of the living. His eyelids flutter, not quite opening, but definitely responsive. The kind of response that would have Dr. Martinez ordering new scans, adjusting his prognosis, maybe even discussing timeline for weaning him off the ventilator. I could still report it. Could walk to the nurse's station right now and tell them I just observed purposeful movement at 2:52 p.m. But once I do that, once it's in his official record, there's no taking it back. The machine of medical intervention kicks into higher gear, the focus shifts from maintaining stable condition to actively facilitating recovery. Instead, I find myself checking the hallway, confirming we're alone, then returning to his bedside with a different intention entirely. You know what's funny, Richard? I keep my voice low, conversational, the way I might talk to any unconscious patient. All these years, I wondered what it would feel like to have power over you for once. To be the one making decisions about what happens to your body. His finger twitches again, and for a wild moment I imagine he can hear me, that somewhere in his damaged brain he understands the delicious reversal of our positions. My hand hovers over his ventilator settings. One small adjustment to his oxygen mixture, from 40% to 35%, wouldn't trigger any alarms immediately. His oxygen saturation might dip gradually over the next hour, creating what would look like natural respiratory complications. By the time anyone noticed the trend, I'd be documenting my concern, suggesting we increase his settings, playing the part of the vigilant nurse who caught a dangerous development. But my hand freezes when I hear footsteps in the hallway. Jenny's voice carries from the nurse's station, Sarah? How's our patient in 314 doing? Stable, I call back, my hand dropping to my side. No changes. The lie comes so easily I almost believe it myself. The next morning brings Dr. Martinez's rounds at exactly 7:15 a.m., same as always. I've been awake all night, not unusual for a 12-hour shift, but this time it wasn't the demands of patient care keeping me alert. It was the growing certainty that Richard's window of vulnerability is closing faster than I anticipated. Morning, Sarah. How was the night? Dr. Martinez pulls up Richard's chart on his tablet, scrolling through the data I've meticulously recorded over the past 8 hours. Quiet. Vitals remain stable throughout. I hand him the printed reports, watching as he reviews my documentation. Everything perfectly normal, professionally thorough. Nothing about the continued finger movements I observed at 11:20 p.m., 1:45 a.m., and 4:30 a.m. Nothing about the way his breathing occasionally fights against the ventilator's rhythm, suggesting his brainstem function is strengthening. Good. He approaches Richard's bedside, pulling out his pen light. Let's see what we're working with today. I watch Dr. Martinez perform the same neurological checks I've been secretly conducting all night. Pupil response, reactive to light, both eyes. Pain stimulus, he presses his knuckles against Richard's sternum, and I see what I've been dreading. Richard's face grimaces, his head turns slightly away from the pressure. Now that's interesting. Dr. Martinez makes a note. Sarah, are you seeing this response to pain stimuli? My throat feels dry. Yes, doctor. When did this start? Has he shown purposeful movement during your shift? The moment hangs between us like a blade. I could lie, claim this is the first sign of improvement I've witnessed. But Jenny was here when the previous shift ended, and she saw me in his room multiple times throughout the night. If she mentions my frequent checks, if Dr. Martinez starts asking pointed questions about timeline discrepancies. I noticed some finger movement yesterday afternoon around 3 p.m., I say carefully. Nothing dramatic. I wasn't certain it was purposeful. Dr. Martinez looks up sharply. Yesterday afternoon? Sarah, any sign of neurological improvement needs to be documented immediately. You know that. Heat rises in my cheeks. I understand, doctor. I wanted to observe him longer before making a definitive assessment. Sometimes what looks like purposeful movement can be deceiving. It's a reasonable explanation, the kind of cautious approach that separates experienced nurses from rookies who jump at every muscle twitch. Dr. Martinez nods, though I catch a flicker of concern in his expression. Going forward, I want any changes, no matter how minor, documented in real time. His brain activity has been increasing steadily, and we may be looking at emergence from coma sooner than originally projected. The words hit like ice water. Emergence from coma. I've been so focused on the immediate signs of improvement that I haven't fully processed what they mean. Richard waking up, talking, returning to the world where my mother will fuss over his recovery and he'll play the role of grateful survivor. What's the timeline looking like? I ask, proud of how clinical I sound. If this trajectory continues? Could be days rather than weeks. I want to start reducing his sedation levels this afternoon, see how he responds. Dr. Martinez taps his tablet, updating Richard's treatment plan. We'll need to monitor him closely. I'd like you to take his cases for the next few days if possible. You know his baseline better than anyone. Of course. The irony is suffocating. Richard's primary nurse, the person most responsible for his care and recovery, is the same woman who spent yesterday calculating how many milliliters of air injected into his foreline would cause a fatal embolism. After Dr. Martinez leaves, I stand alone with Richard again. The morning sun streams through the window, highlighting the gray threading through his brown hair. He looks older than his 55 years, diminished by the tubes and machines sustaining his life. But I can see it now, the subtle signs of a mind fighting its way back to consciousness. His eyelids flutter more frequently. His fingers respond when I test their reflexes. The ventilator shows he's occasionally trying to breathe over the machine's set rate, a sign his respiratory drive is returning. I have maybe 48 hours before he starts showing obvious signs of awareness. 48 hours before Dr. Martinez begins the process of bringing him fully back to consciousness. My phone buzzes, a text from Mom. Dr. Martinez called. He says Richard is showing wonderful progress. I'm coming in early today. Can you stay a little late so we can talk? I want to hear everything, I stare at the message, then at Richard's face. In 2 days, maybe 3, he'll be awake enough to squeeze my mother's hand, to whisper her name, to play the part of the beloved husband who survived against the odds. The prayer groups will call it a miracle. The family will celebrate his second chance at life. And I'll go back to being the dutiful stepdaughter who saved him, whose professional expertise helped guide his recovery. Unless I don't. The plan forms itself while I'm restocking supplies in the medication room at 3:17 p.m. It's elegant in its simplicity, the kind of solution that would make any forensic investigator nod with satisfaction at the tragic but understandable sequence of events. Ventilator-associated pneumonia. VAP, as we call it in the ICU. It happens to roughly 15% of patients on prolonged mechanical ventilation, especially those who've been intubated for more than a week. Richard's been on the ventilator for 9 days now, well within the danger zone. The symptoms start gradually: fever, increased secretions, changes in chest x-rays. By the time it progresses to sepsis, even aggressive antibiotic treatment fails about 30% of the time. The beauty of it is that VAP isn't really preventable, not entirely. We do everything we can: elevate the head of the bed, perform oral care every 4 hours, suction secretions regularly. But sometimes bacteria still find their way into the lungs. Sometimes the body's compromised immune system just can't fight back effectively. Sometimes a nurse might accidentally introduce contamination during routine suctioning. A momentary lapse in sterile technique, perhaps while she's distracted by thoughts of her childhood, memories of being pinned against a bedroom wall by hands that smelled like cigarettes and motor oil. I'm calculating timelines when Jenny appears in the doorway. Sarah? Everything okay? You've been in here a while. Just double-checking our supply levels. I hold up the clipboard I've been pretending to review. Making sure we have enough saline flushes for tonight. Your mom's been asking for you. She's got Father Mackenzie with her. They want to do some kind of blessing for Richard. My stomach clenches. Father Mackenzie's here? The one from St. Anne's, yeah. Sweet old guy. He was telling me about some patient who woke up from a coma after his congregation did a special prayer service. Jenny's expression brightens. Maybe it'll help Richard too. I follow her back toward room 314, where I can hear Mom's voice mixed with a man's deeper tones. Through the doorway, I see Father Mackenzie, 70-something, silver-haired, wearing the same black shirt and white collar I remember from my confirmation ceremony 16 years ago. He's standing beside Richard's bed, one weathered hand resting on Richard's forehead. Sarah, dear. Father Mackenzie turns when I enter, his face creasing into a warm smile. Your mother tells me you've been taking wonderful care of Richard. It's a blessing to have family in the medical profession during times like these. Father Mackenzie wanted to give Richard the sacrament of the sick, Mom explains, clutching her rosary. Just in case, well, as a precaution. But also as a prayer for healing. I nod, trying to look appropriately reverent while Father Mackenzie pulls out a small vial of oil and begins the familiar ritual. His voice carries the cadence of decades spent offering comfort to the dying and desperate. Through this holy anointing, may the Lord in his love and mercy help you with the grace of the Holy Spirit. The irony burns. Here's a priest anointing the forehead of a man who spent years violating a child, asking God to grant him healing and peace. I wonder what Father Mackenzie would think if he knew he was blessing someone who whispered threats into an 8-year-old's ear, promising terrible consequences if she ever told anyone about their special secret. May the Lord who frees you from sin save you and raise you up, Father Mackenzie continues, his thumb tracing the sign of the cross on Richard's skin. Mom is crying now, quiet tears of hope and faith. She believes in this ritual, believes it will help tip the scales toward Richard's recovery. What she doesn't know is that I've already decided which direction those scales will tip. Amen, I murmur along with the others, the word feeling like ash in my mouth. After Father Mackenzie leaves, Mom settles into her usual chair, looking more peaceful than I've seen her since the accident. I feel better now, she says, reaching for Richard's hand. Like God's really watching over him. I check Richard's monitors, noting that his heart rate has been gradually increasing throughout the day, from 78 this morning to 84 now. His blood pressure is trending upward too, 118/75, the highest it's been since admission. Even his respiratory rate shows he's fighting the ventilator more frequently, taking spontaneous breaths between the machine's programmed cycles. Dr. Martinez's plan to reduce his sedation is already taking effect. By tomorrow evening, Richard might be responsive enough to follow simple commands. By Thursday, he could be breathing on his own. Mom, I say carefully, have you thought about what happens when he wakes up? The recovery process, I mean. Brain injuries can change people sometimes. She looks up from her prayer book. Dr. Martinez says there might be some memory issues, maybe some physical therapy needed. But the important thing is getting him back. Her voice strengthens with conviction. We'll face whatever comes next together, as a family. Family. That word again, carrying all its poisonous weight. Of course, I agree. We'll face it together. But what I'm really thinking is, not if I introduce some bacteria into his breathing tube during tonight's 2 a.m. suctioning. Not if his fever spikes to 102 by Thursday morning. Not if the infection I give him tonight overwhelms his system before anyone realizes what's happening. The plan is crystallizing, becoming more real with each passing hour. By tomorrow night, I'll either be the nurse who helped save Richard Clemens, or the one who watched helplessly as he succumbed to a tragic but not uncommon complication. The choice, finally, is mine. At 11:43 p.m., the ICU settles into its familiar nighttime rhythm. Most of the family visitors have gone home, leaving only the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional whispered conversation between nurses at the station. I'm alone with Richard for what might be the last time. Tomorrow's day shift will bring Dr. Martinez's more aggressive weaning protocol, and my window of opportunity will slam shut. I've spent the last hour reviewing his care plan, memorizing every detail of his current status. Temperature, 98.2 degrees. White blood cell count from this morning's labs, 8,500, perfectly normal. Chest x-ray from yesterday showed clear lung fields with no signs of infection or fluid buildup. All of that could change very quickly. I'm preparing the suction equipment when I hear footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, deliberate steps that don't match the soft-soled shoes most medical staff wear. Through the doorway, I see a man I don't recognize approaching the nurse's station, mid-40s, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt despite the hospital's late-night chill. "Excuse me," he says to Jenny, who's covering the night shift. "I'm looking for Richard Clemens' room." I'm his brother, Michael. My blood turns to ice water. Richard has a brother. I remember Mom mentioning him occasionally over the years, usually with disapproval. The black sheep of the Clemens family, someone who moved to Oregon years ago and rarely visited. I haven't seen him since Mom and Richard's wedding, where he spent most of the reception drinking beer by himself in the parking lot. "Room 314, Jenny tells him, pointing in our direction. "Visiting hours are technically over, but for family we can make exceptions." "Is his wife expecting you?" "No, I wanted to surprise Linda." Caught the red eye from Portland as soon as I heard. Michael Clemens runs a hand through graying hair that's identical to Richard's. "How's he doing?" The doctors I talked to on the phone weren't very encouraging. "Actually, he's shown significant improvement today. Sarah, his nurse, can give you more details." I force myself to walk to the doorway, extending my hand with what I hope passes for professional warmth. "Mr. Clemens, I'm Sarah. I've been coordinating your brother's care." Michael's handshake is firm, his eyes sharp despite the exhaustion creasing his features. "Sarah. Sarah Morrison? Linda's daughter?" "Yes." I'm surprised he remembers my name, considering we've met maybe 3 times in 15 years. "Jesus, I didn't realize you worked here." His expression shifts, becoming more personal, less formal. "This must be hard for you, taking care of family." "I appreciate everything you're doing for Rich." Something in his tone catches my attention, a subtle emphasis on the word appreciate that feels weighted with meaning I can't quite decode. I study his face, looking for clues, but his expression remains carefully neutral. "Of course. He's getting excellent care from our entire team." I gesture toward room 314. "Would you like to see him?" Michael nods, following me into the room where Richard lies unchanged, tubes, wires, the steady rise and fall of artificial breathing. But Michael's reaction isn't what I expect. Instead of the shock or sadness most family members show, his face hardens into something resembling disgust. 30 years of smoking and drinking finally caught up with the bastard, he mutters, barely loud enough for me to hear. I blink, certain I misheard. "I'm sorry?" Michael glances at me, seeming to remember where he is. "Nothing. Just, seeing him like this is harder than I expected." He moves closer to the bed, staring down at his unconscious brother. "The doctors think he'll recover?" "His prognosis has improved significantly. Dr. Martinez is optimistic about neurological recovery." I watch Michael's face carefully as I deliver this news, looking for signs of relief or gratitude. Instead, his jaw tightens. "Of course he is. Rich always was too stubborn to die when he should." The words hang in the air between us, loaded with implications I'm afraid to examine too closely. Michael catches my stare and attempts a weak smile. "Sorry, that came out wrong. I'm tired, worried about Linda, not thinking straight." He reaches out as if to touch Richard's hand, then stops. "What I meant was, well, you know how Richard is. Once he sets his mind to something." But I heard what he really said. And the way he's looking at Richard, like he's seeing something distasteful, something that deserves to be lying helpless and vulnerable, makes me wonder what Michael Clemens knows about his brother that the rest of us have tried so hard to forget. "You know," Michael says quietly, still staring down at Richard's motionless form, "I always wondered if someone would finally call him out for what he really was." My heart stops. The suction equipment in my hand suddenly feels impossibly heavy, and I have to concentrate on keeping my breathing steady. "What do you mean?" Michael's eyes meet mine across Richard's bed, and I see something there that makes my skin crawl with recognition, the same haunted look I've caught glimpses of in my own mirror over the years. "Sarah, can we talk somewhere private? Away from here?" I glance at the monitors, checking Richard's vitals one more time. Everything stable, no immediate concerns. The family conference room is empty. Down the hall. We walk in silence, our footsteps echoing off the polished linoleum. The conference room smells like stale coffee and industrial disinfectant, its fluorescent lights casting everything in harsh white. Michael closes the door behind us and leans against it, as if he's gathering courage for whatever he's about to say. "How old were you when Linda married him?" he asks finally. 7. The word comes out automatically, though every instinct I have is screaming at me to deflect, to change the subject, to maintain the careful facade I built around this secret. Christ. Michael runs both hands through his hair, a gesture so similar to Richard's that it makes me flinch. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to know that whatever the answer is, I won't judge you for it." I wrap my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the hospital's aggressive heating. "Ask me what?" "Did he ever?" Michael's voice cracks. He starts again, stronger this time. "Did Richard ever touch you? When you were a kid?" The question hits like a physical blow. For 13 years, no one has asked me this directly. Mom deflected when I tried to tell her at 10 years old. School counselors talked around the edges when my grades dropped in middle school. Even my college therapist focused on processing difficult family dynamics rather than naming what actually happened. But here's Michael Clemens, Richard's own brother, asking the question I've been waiting my entire adult life to hear. "Why would you ask me that?" My voice sounds hollow, distant. Michael's face crumples. "Because he did it to me too. From the time I was 8 until I was big enough to fight him off when I turned 14. His hands are shaking now, and he shoves them into his pockets. And because I've spent the last 25 years wondering if he'd do it to anyone else. Wondering if I should have said something, should have warned Linda before she married him. The confession hangs between us like a live wire. I stare at Michael, this man I barely know, Richard's brother, someone who's carried the same poison I have for decades, and feel something fundamental shift in my chest. Yes, I whisper. From when I was 8 until I was 13. When I finally got big enough to lock my bedroom door and threaten to scream if he came near me. Michael closes his eyes, leaning heavily against the door. Fuck. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm so goddamn sorry. You couldn't have known. I should have known. His voice is fierce now, angry. I should have said something to Linda, should have made sure she understood what kind of man she was bringing into her home. Into your home. We stand there in the fluorescent glare, two survivors of Richard Clemens finally acknowledging the truth that shaped both our lives. And suddenly, the plan I've been crafting, the contaminated suction catheter, the deliberate infection, the careful murder disguised as medical complication, feels different. I'm not the only one who wants Richard to stay unconscious forever. Michael, I say carefully, what would you do if you had the power to make sure he never woke up? Michael's question hangs in the sterile air between us, and I see my own desperate thoughts reflected in his haunted eyes. Before I can answer, my phone buzzes with an urgent notification from the hospital's patient monitoring system. Richard's heart rate has spiked to 98 BPM. I have to get back, I say, the moment fracturing around us. We rush down the hallway together, and I can see the concern on Jenny's face as she approaches room 314. Sarah, his vitals just jumped in the last 5 minutes. Temperature's climbing too, 99.1 degrees. I check the monitors, my pulse racing. This isn't part of any plan I've made. Richard's blood pressure has risen to 125/82, and his respiratory rate shows increased agitation against the ventilator. Most concerning is the way his eyes are moving rapidly beneath closed lids, REM activity that suggests higher brain function returning. Has Dr. Martinez been notified? I ask, pulling up Richard's current medication levels on the tablet. I just paged him. He's on his way in. Jenny glances at Michael, who's standing frozen in the doorway. Sir, you might want to step back while we assess the situation. But Michael doesn't move. He's staring at Richard's face with an expression I recognize, the look of someone watching their abuser show signs of returning strength. Is he waking up? He asks, his voice barely audible. Possibly, I admit, adjusting Richard's position to get better access to his 4 lines. These vital signs suggest increased neurological activity. What I don't say is that this acceleration in his recovery wasn't expected for another 24 to 48 hours. Whatever progress Richard's brain has made tonight, it's happening faster than any of Dr. Martinez's projections suggested. My window of opportunity isn't just closing, it's slamming shut in real time. Michael moves closer to the bed, and I notice his hands are clenched into fists at his sides. Sarah, he says quietly, you asked me what I'd do if I had the power to keep him unconscious. I glance toward the hallway, confirming we're momentarily alone. Jenny is at the nurse's station, probably calling Dr. Martinez with updates. Michael, don't. I've thought about it every day for 25 years, he continues, his voice gaining intensity. Every time I heard he was happy, that he'd found a good woman, that he was playing stepfather to some little girl. I've imagined walking into his house and putting my hands around his throat until he stopped breathing. Richard's eyelids flutter, a definitive movement that makes my stomach drop. In medical terms, this represents significant neurological improvement. In personal terms, it means Richard Clemens is fighting his way back to consciousness, back to a world where he'll be celebrated as a miracle survivor. The thing is, Michael says, reaching out to touch the ventilator tube, I never had the medical knowledge to make it look accidental. His implication hits me like electricity. I grab his wrist, pulling his hand away from Richard's breathing apparatus. Don't. Not here, not like this. Why not? You're the expert, Sarah. You know exactly how to do this without getting caught. His eyes are wild now, desperate in a way that terrifies me. We could end this tonight. Make sure he never hurts another child, never puts his hands on anyone else's daughter. Through the doorway, I can see Dr. Martinez stepping off the elevator, his expression focused and urgent. In less than 2 minutes, this room will be full of medical staff assessing Richard's rapid improvement, adjusting his treatment plan, accelerating his path back to consciousness. Michael, listen to me, I whisper urgently. Dr. Martinez is here. You need to pull yourself together and act like a concerned brother, or we're both going to have serious problems. He nods shakily, stepping back from the bed just as Dr. Martinez enters with 2 residents trailing behind him. Good evening, Mr. Clemens, Dr. Martinez nods to Michael before turning his attention to Richard's monitors. Sarah, talk me through what you've observed in the last hour. I launch into my clinical report, describing the vital sign changes and increased neurological activity with perfect professional detachment. But underneath my calm exterior, I'm calculating frantically. Richard's Glasgow coma scale score has probably jumped to a 10 or 11 based on tonight's developments. Dr. Martinez will likely order immediate adjustments to his sedation protocol, maybe even discuss extubation within the next 24 hours. As I watch the medical team work around Richard's bedside, checking his responses and updating his treatment plan, I realize that Michael's desperate confession has changed everything. I'm no longer just a survivor contemplating revenge, I'm now complicit in someone else's potential plan for murder. And I have less than 12 hours to decide whether I'm going to stop him or help him succeed. Dr. Martinez finishes his examination at 12:47 a.m., and his verdict is exactly what I've been dreading, significant neurological improvement. We'll reduce his propofol drip by half and reassess in 6 hours. If he continues this trajectory, we may be looking at extubation by Thursday afternoon. Michael's face goes white. Extubation means removing the breathing tube, Dr. Martinez explains, making notes on his tablet. Your brother is showing signs of spontaneous respiratory effort. His brain function appears to be recovering faster than our initial prognosis suggested. He looks pleased, the way doctors do when they get to deliver unexpectedly good news. Sarah, I want hourly neurological assessments through the night. Any changes in his responsiveness, I want to know immediately. Of course, doctor. After the medical team disperses, Michael and I are alone with Richard again. The reduction in sedation is already taking effect. I can see it in the way Richard's facial muscles occasionally tense, like he's trying to surface from deep water. Thursday afternoon, Michael repeats, his voice hollow. That's 36 hours. I check the hallway, then close the door most of the way. Michael, whatever you're thinking, you need to stop. There are cameras in the corridors, security rounds every 2 hours, and Jenny's been watching this room closely since his vitals spiked. You think I don't know that? He's pacing now, 3 steps to the window, 3 steps back. You think I flew here from Oregon without a plan? Something in his tone makes my skin crawl. What kind of plan? Michael pulls out his phone, scrolling to a photo of a small glass vial filled with clear liquid. Insulin, he says simply. Picked it up from a veterinary supply place outside Portland. Technically it's for my girlfriend's diabetic cat, but insulin is insulin. My nursing training kicks in automatically, calculating dosages and timelines. Michael, that's 50 units of regular insulin, injected into his foreport during shift change when the hallways are busiest, he continues, his voice gaining confidence. His blood sugar crashes within 30 minutes. Brain damage from hypoglycemia looks exactly like complications from his existing head trauma. Even if someone runs a glucose test, insulin metabolizes quickly, and who's going to suspect murder from his grieving brother who flew across the country to be here? The plan is terrifyingly sound. Insulin-induced hypoglycemia has been called the perfect murder weapon precisely because it's so difficult to detect post-mortem. Richard's existing brain injury would provide perfect cover for the neurological damage that severe low blood sugar causes. You've thought this through, I say quietly. I've had 25 years to think it through. Michael pockets his phone, his expression hardening. The only question is timing. I need maybe 3 minutes alone with him, and I need to be sure no one will interrupt. I watch Richard's chest rise and fall with mechanical precision, counting the breaths he doesn't deserve to take. In my pocket, my own phone buzzes with a text from Mom, * can't sleep. Keep thinking about how blessed we are that you're there taking care of him. God works in mysterious ways. Love you, honey, *. God works in mysterious ways. The irony is suffocating. The shift change happens at 6 a.m., I hear myself saying. Jenny leaves, day shift comes on, but there's usually a 15-minute gap where coverage is thin. Everyone's in report, getting updated on overnight developments. Michael stops pacing. You're helping me? I stare at Richard's face, remembering the weight of his body pinning me against my childhood bedroom wall, the whispered threats about what would happen if I ever told. I'm giving you information. What you do with it is your choice. But even as I say it, I know I've crossed a line. I'm no longer just contemplating murder, I'm actively facilitating it. And the most terrifying part is how right it feels. The plan should feel perfect, but at 2:30 a.m., everything starts falling apart. I'm performing Richard's scheduled respiratory assessment when his eyes suddenly snap open, not the gradual flutter of emerging consciousness I expected, but the sharp, immediate awareness of someone fully awake. His gaze locks onto mine with an intensity that makes my blood freeze. He can't speak with the ventilator tube down his throat, but his eyes are completely lucid. Alert. And absolutely furious. Oh God, I whisper, stumbling backward from his bedside. This isn't how emergence from coma is supposed to work. Patients gradually regain consciousness over hours or days, moving through predictable stages of confusion and disorientation. They don't just wake up and stare at you with perfect recognition and rage. Richard's right hand moves, not the random twitching I've been documenting, but purposeful movement. He raises his arm and points directly at me, his index finger steady and accusatory. Then he begins thrashing against his restraints, the monitors erupting in a cacophony of alarms. Jenny bursts through the door within seconds, taking in the scene, Richard fully conscious and agitated, me pressed against the far wall like I've seen a ghost. Sarah, what happened? His heart rate just spiked to 140. He woke up, I manage, my voice barely audible over the screaming monitors. Just now, completely awake. Jenny moves to Richard's side, her training taking over. Mr. Clemens, you're in the hospital. You were in an accident. The tube in your throat is helping you breathe, don't try to fight it. But Richard isn't looking at Jenny. His eyes remain fixed on me, and I can see him trying to speak around the ventilator tube. His lips form silent words I can't make out, but the hatred in his expression is crystal clear. Page Dr. Martinez, Jenny calls over her shoulder. And get respiratory therapy up here. If he's this alert, we need to assess for extubation immediately. My legs feel like water. In less than 5 minutes, this room will be swarming with medical staff. Richard will be extubated within the hour, not Thursday afternoon like we planned. He'll be talking by sunrise, telling Mom how grateful he is to be alive, how excited he is to go home and continue being her devoted husband. Michael appears in the doorway, drawn by the commotion, and stops dead when he sees Richard's open eyes. Jesus Christ. Richard's gaze shifts to his brother, and something passes between them, a moment of recognition loaded with decades of shared history. Richard's expression doesn't soften with brotherly affection. Instead, his eyes narrow with what looks like warning. Sir, you'll need to step back, Jenny says, checking Richard's blood pressure manually. 190 over 110, Sarah, draw up 5 milligrams of labetalol. We need to get his pressure down before he strokes out. I move toward the medication card on autopilot, muscle memory taking over while my mind races. Richard is not only awake, he's hypertensive, agitated, and focused on me with laser intensity. This is the nightmare scenario I never allowed myself to fully imagine, Richard conscious and aware while Michael and I are standing in his room, having just finalized plans for his murder. As I prepare the labetalol injection, my hands begin to shake. Not the subtle tremor of fatigue or stress, but violent shaking that makes drawing medication impossible. The syringe clatters to the floor. Sarah? Jenny looks at me with concern. You okay? I'm sorry, I can't finish the sentence. Richard's eyes are still boring into me, and now he's making more deliberate attempts to speak. The sounds coming from around his breathing tube are getting clearer, more insistent. Michael steps closer to the bed, ostensibly to comfort his brother, but I can see the insulin vial outlined in his shirt pocket. His hand moves toward it, and I realize he's actually considering it, right here, right now, with Jenny in the room and Richard fully conscious. Michael, don't, I whisper urgently. But Richard sees it too. His eyes widen, and he begins fighting his restraints with renewed violence, the bed rails rattling as he tries to sit up. The sound he makes around the ventilator tube is unmistakably a scream. That's when Dr. Martinez arrives with the respiratory therapist, and I know our window has closed forever. What's his blood pressure now? Dr. Martinez asks, moving immediately to assess Richard's neurological status. 195/115, Jenny reports. Sarah was drawing labetalol but. I'll handle the medication, Dr. Martinez cuts her off, noting my obvious distress. Sarah, why don't you take a break? You've been here all night. I want to leave, need to get Michael away from Richard's bedside before he does something catastrophic. But Richard's eyes follow me toward the door, and I see his lips form a single, silent word that makes my heart stop. Asterisk Sarah. Asterisk. He remembers everything. And now he's awake. The next few hours blur together in a nightmare of medical efficiency. By 4:15 a.m., Richard is extubated and breathing on his own. By 5:30 a.m., he's sitting propped up in bed, his voice hoarse but perfectly coherent as he tells Dr. Martinez about phantom memories from his coma, dreams that felt real, he says, about people wanting to hurt him. That's completely normal, Dr. Martinez reassures him, making notes about Richard's remarkable recovery. Patients often report vivid dreams or feelings of paranoia during emergence from coma. It's your brain's way of processing the trauma. But when Dr. Martinez steps out to call Mom with the incredible news, Richard's demeanor changes instantly. His eyes find mine across the room, and that familiar predatory smile spreads across his face, the same expression I remember from my childhood bedroom doorway. Hello, Sarah, he says, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying perfectly in the quiet room. You look surprised to see me awake. Michael hasn't left, despite repeated suggestions from the nursing staff that he should get some rest. He's positioned himself in the chair by the window, the insulin vial still hidden in his pocket, watching his brother with the intensity of a trapped animal. How are you feeling, Richard? I manage, clinging to professional protocol like a lifeline. Any pain or discomfort? Nothing I can't handle. Richard's fingers drum against the bed rail, a nervous habit I remember from family dinners, usually right before he'd suggest I help him with something in the garage or basement. Though I have to say, it's interesting waking up to find you been my nurse this whole time. Taking such good care of me. The emphasis he puts on those last words makes my skin crawl. Even flat on his back in a hospital bed, attached to monitors and weakened from 9 days in a coma, Richard still manages to make everything sound like a threat. Sarah's been wonderful, Michael says suddenly, his voice tight. Really dedicated to your recovery, Rich. Above and beyond what most people would do. Richard's gaze shifts to his brother, and I catch the flash of recognition that passes between them, Michael's words carrying their own double meaning that Richard clearly understands. I'm sure she has been. Richard's smile widens. Sarah always was such a helpful girl. So eager to please. Some things never change, do they? Jenny bustles in with Richard's breakfast tray, oblivious to the undercurrents of menace threading through our conversation. Mr. Clemens, it's wonderful to see you awake. Your wife is on her way, she's so excited she could barely speak when Dr. Martinez called. Linda's coming? Richard's expression immediately shifts to that of a grateful, recovering husband. I can't wait to see her. This whole experience has reminded me how precious life is, how important family is. He looks directly at me when he says family, and I have to grip the doorframe to keep from running. She should be here within the hour, Jenny continues, adjusting Richard's bed position. She's bringing your blue pajamas, the ones with the sailboat you like so much. Those are my favorites, Richard says warmly, playing the part perfectly. But his eyes remain fixed on me, and I can see the calculation behind them. He's planning something, working out how to use his miraculous recovery to his advantage. Michael stands abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I should go call work, let them know I'll be staying a few more days. Don't leave on my account, Richard says mildly. We have so much catching up to do, Michael. It's been too long since we really talked. The threat is unmistakable. Richard knows exactly why Michael is here, and he's not planning to let either of us simply walk away from what almost happened in this room. The insulin vial burns like a beacon in Michael's pocket, visible evidence of our failed conspiracy. And in 90 minutes, Mom will arrive to find her husband not only alive but fully recovered, ready to resume the life we'd almost managed to end. Richard Clemens is awake, aware, and already 3 steps ahead of us. The insulin vial might as well be radioactive. I watch Michael fidget with his pocket while Richard tracks every movement with predatory awareness. Mom will be here any moment, probably clutching flowers from the hospital gift shop in tears of gratitude. Sarah, Richard says conversationally, could you check my foresight? It's been bothering me since I woke up. My feet refuse to move. The request sounds innocent enough, routine patient care that any competent nurse would handle without hesitation. But Richard's tone carries the same false casualness he used when asking 8-year-old me to help him look for something in the basement. I can have Jenny take a look, I offer, backing toward the door. No need to bother her. You know how thorough you are with these things. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. Besides, we should catch up. It's been so long since we really talked. Michael stands frozen by the window, his hand unconsciously moving toward his pocket again. Richard notices immediately. Michael, you look pale. All that traveling catching up with you? Richard's voice carries brotherly concern that sounds convincing until you see his eyes. You should sit down. Maybe check your blood sugar, you always were hypoglycemic when you got stressed. The word hypoglycemic hangs in the air like a landmine. Michael's face drains of color entirely. Actually, I say quickly, your mother specifically asked me to call her the moment you were fully awake. She's been so worried. Mom can wait 5 more minutes. Richard's tone sharpens slightly. Family time is precious, don't you think? We should make the most of it while we can. Before I can respond, my phone buzzes with a text. Then another. Then a rapid series that makes my stomach drop. Asterisk Jenny, Sarah, where are you? Need you in 314 immediately, asterisk. Asterisk Jenny, patient in 318 coding. Need all hands, asterisk. Jenny, Sarah respond now. The messages are followed by the hospital's overhead page system crackling to life. Code blue, room 318. Code blue, room 318. Through Richard's doorway, I can see the controlled chaos of medical staff rushing toward the emergency. Jenny appears in our doorframe, her face flushed with adrenaline. Sarah, I need you. Mr. Peterson's in defib, we're short-staffed and respiratories tied up with another emergency on 3. It's the perfect excuse to escape, but Richard's voice stops me cold. Go ahead, Sarah. Save a life. His emphasis on those words makes them sound like mockery. Michael and I will just sit here and reminisce until you get back. Won't we, brother? Michael's hand is trembling now, visibly shaking as he stares at Richard. The insulin vial creates a small but obvious bulge in his shirt pocket, evidence that Richard has clearly identified and catalogued. I'll be back to check on you soon, I tell Richard, knowing I sound exactly like the frightened child I once was. I'm counting on it, he replies. As Jenny and I rush toward room 318, I catch a glimpse of Mom stepping off the elevator, her face radiant with joy and relief. She's carrying those blue sailboat pajamas and what looks like a homemade card, probably from the prayer group at St. Anne's. In 30 seconds, she'll walk into room 314 to find her beloved husband miraculously recovered. She'll see Michael sitting awkwardly by the window, probably sweating through his shirt while trying to figure out how to dispose of veterinary insulin. And Richard will smile that perfect husband smile while planning exactly how he's going to handle his wife's daughter and his own brother. The code blue alarm continues blaring, but all I can think about is what's happening in that room behind me, and whether Michael is desperate enough to use that insulin with Mom standing right there. The code blue in room 318 takes 43 minutes to resolve, 43 minutes of chest compressions, defibrillation, and desperate medication pushes that ultimately fail. Mr. Peterson, a 72-year-old grandfather recovering from routine gallbladder surgery, dies at 7:28 a.m. while I'm elbow-deep in failed resuscitation efforts. When I finally return to room 314, the scene that greets me is a perfect tableau of family reunion. Mom sits beside Richard's bed holding his hand, tears streaming down her face as she listens to him describe his journey back to consciousness. Michael has moved to the far corner, his complexion still pale but his hands no longer shaking. The insulin vial is nowhere to be seen. Sarah, honey. Mom jumps up to embrace me. Isn't this wonderful? Dr. Martinez says Richard's recovery is nothing short of miraculous. His neurological function is completely intact. That's incredible, I manage, studying Michael's face over Mom's shoulder. He gives me an almost imperceptible shake of his head, and I understand, whatever window of opportunity existed has closed. Richard watches our interaction with keen interest. Sarah looks exhausted, Linda. She's been working so hard to take care of me. Haven't you, sweetheart? The endearment hits like a physical blow. He hasn't called me that since I was 13 years old and finally got brave enough to tell him I'd scream if he touched me again. Hearing it now, in front of Mom, feels like he's marking territory. The nursing staff here has been exceptional, Richard continues, his voice warm with gratitude. Especially Sarah. So dedicated, so attentive to my needs. Mom beams with pride. I raised her right. Family takes care of family. Yes, Richard agrees, his eyes never leaving my face. Family is everything. Dr. Martinez appears in the doorway, clipboard in hand and looking genuinely pleased. Mr. Clemens, I have to say, your recovery has exceeded every projection we made. Your cognitive function tests are perfect, motor skills intact, no apparent deficits from the brain trauma. When can I go home? Richard asks, though he phrases it as if home is something he's desperately missed rather than a place where he'll resume playing the devoted husband. We'll want to monitor you for another 24 to 48 hours, just as a precaution. But barring any complications, you could be discharged by Friday. Friday. Less than 48 hours from now, Richard will walk out of this hospital as a miracle survivor, a man given a second chance at life. The prayer groups will celebrate. The family will throw a welcome home party. And Mom will spend the rest of her life grateful to God for saving her husband. That's wonderful news, Mom says, squeezing Richard's hand. I've already called your job, they're holding your position as long as you need. And I've been keeping up with the yard work, though the lawnmower's been giving me trouble. I'll take care of all that once I'm home, Richard assures her. This experience has really put things in perspective for me. Made me realize what's truly important. He glances at Michael, then at me. I think it's time I focused more on family relationships. Spent more quality time with the people I care about most. Michael suddenly stands, his chair scraping against the floor. I should probably head back to Oregon soon. Take care of some things at home. Nonsense, Richard says immediately. You just got here, Mike. Stay through the weekend at least. Linda would love to have you, wouldn't you, honey? Mom nods eagerly. Of course. It's been so long since we've all been together. Sarah, you should come for dinner Sunday night when your shift rotation changes. We'll make it a real celebration. The thought of sitting around Mom's dinner table with Richard, healthy, recovered Richard who remembers exactly what Michael and I almost did, makes my vision blur at the edges. I'll have to check my schedule, I say weakly. You'll make time, Richard says, and it's not a suggestion. After everything we've been through together, the least we can do is share a meal as a family. Dr. Martinez moves on to his next patient, and Mom excuses herself to call the prayer group with the good news. For just a moment, it's the three of us alone, Richard propped up in his hospital bed like a king holding court, Michael pressed against the window like he's calculating jump distances, and me standing frozen in the middle. So, Richard says conversationally, interesting night you two had while I was unconscious. The words hang in the sterile air like poison gas. Richard's casual tone makes it worse somehow, like he's commenting on the weather rather than acknowledging that his own brother came here to kill him. I don't know what you mean, I say, but my voice cracks on the last word. Richard's smile spreads wider. Oh, I think you do. See, the funny thing about being in a coma is that you're not always as unconscious as people think. Especially toward the end, when your brain starts waking up but your body hasn't caught up yet. Michael's breathing has gone shallow and rapid. Rich. I heard things, Richard continues, his eyes moving between us like a cat watching two mice. Conversations. Plans. Very detailed plans about ventilator-associated pneumonia. About insulin and shift changes and 3-minute windows. He pauses, letting that sink in. Amazing what people will say when they think you can't hear them. My legs give out. I sink into the chair Mom vacated, trying to process what he's telling us. How much did you hear? Enough. Richard adjusts his position in the bed, wincing slightly, the first sign of genuine discomfort he's shown. Enough to know that my devoted stepdaughter and my loving brother spent considerable time discussing the best ways to murder me without getting caught. The heart monitor shows my pulse spiking to 110 beats per minute. Michael has gone completely white, one hand pressed against the window like he's trying to melt through it. The insulin was particularly creative, Mike, Richard says, turning his attention to his brother. Very thorough research. Though I have to ask, did you really think I wouldn't recognize the smell of veterinary clinics? You always did reek of that place after your weekend job in high school. Michael's mouth opens and closes soundlessly. The insulin vial is gone. I assume he ditched it in the men's room during the code blue emergency, but Richard's knowledge of it proves we're already caught. What do you want? I whisper. Richard's expression shifts, becoming almost thoughtful. You know, that's an interesting question. What do I want? He drums his fingers against the bed rail, that same nervous habit, but now it sounds like a countdown. I want my wife to keep believing I'm the man she married. I want to go home Friday and resume my life as Richard Clemens, beloved husband and miraculous survivor. Then why are you telling us you know? Michael asks, his voice barely audible. Because I also want to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Richard's tone hardens. I want to be very clear about the consequences of crossing me. Through the doorway, I can see Mom at the nurse's station, probably sharing Richard's miraculous recovery story with anyone who'll listen. Her voice carries down the hall, complete neurological recovery. The doctors say they've never seen anything like it. Here's what's going to happen, Richard says, lowering his voice so we have to lean closer to hear him. Michael, you're going to extend your visit through next weekend. You're going to play the grateful brother, help Linda around the house while I recover, and act like we're one big happy family. Michael nods mutely. And Sarah, Richard's gaze locks onto mine, you're going to continue being my dedicated nurse until I'm discharged. Then you're going to visit regularly, family dinners, holidays, all the occasions Linda loves so much. You're going to smile and pretend you're happy I survived. And if we don't? I ask, though I already know the answer. Richard's smile returns, cold and predatory. Then I might have to share some interesting stories about the conversations I overheard while I was unconscious. Stories about conspiracy to commit murder. Stories that would be very difficult to explain to the police. The trap snaps shut around us with perfect precision. Richard holds all the cards now, our failed murder plot, our motives, our futures. We're more trapped than we ever were before. The answer comes to me at 3:47 a.m. on my final shift before Richard's discharge, while I'm updating his medication chart for the last time. Mom texted earlier about the welcome home party she's planning, how the whole congregation from St. Anne's wants to celebrate his miraculous recovery, how blessed they all feel to witness such divine intervention. But as I stand in room 314 watching Richard sleep, real sleep now, not the artificial unconsciousness of coma, I realize something that makes my blood sing with possibility. Richard thinks he holds all the cards. He believes his knowledge of our murder plot makes him untouchable, that Michael and I will spend the rest of our lives dancing to his tune out of fear of exposure. What he doesn't understand is that he's given me something infinitely more valuable than the power to kill him. He's given me the power to destroy him completely. I pull out my phone and scroll to the audio recording app one activated during our last family conversation yesterday. Richard's voice comes through crystal clear. I heard things. Conversations. Plans. Very detailed plans about ventilator-associated pneumonia. About insulin and shift changes. For 43 minutes, I recorded Richard Clemens describing, in meticulous detail, exactly how his stepdaughter and brother planned to murder him. How he listened to every word while pretending to be unconscious. How he's going to use that knowledge to control us for the rest of our lives. What the recording also captures, buried in Richard's gloating monologue, are details no innocent man would know. Medical specifics about inducing infections. Precise information about insulin dosages and metabolization rates. Most damaging of all, his casual references to why we might want him dead, references that only make sense if you understand what he did to both of us as children. The thing about 8-year-olds, Richard's recorded voice says with chilling clarity, is they never forget. Even when they should. I saved 3 copies of the recording to different cloud accounts, then drafted an email to Detective Maria Santos at the county sheriff's office. I met her 2 years ago when she was investigating a domestic violence case involving one of my patients. She specializes in crimes against children, and she's built her career on taking down predators who think they're too smart to get caught. The email is simple. Asterisk Detective Santos, I have information regarding historical sexual abuse of minors by Richard Clemens, DOB March 15, 1969, current address 247, Pine Street. Evidence includes recorded confession and testimony from 2 adult survivors. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. Sarah Morrison, RN asterisk. I attach the audio file and hit send at exactly 4:12 a.m. Richard wakes up 20 minutes later to find me checking his discharge paperwork with a genuine smile on my face, the first real smile I've felt in 9 days. Good morning, I say cheerfully. Ready to go home? He studies my expression suspiciously. You seem different today. I'm happy for you, I tell him honestly. This really is a new beginning. What Richard doesn't know, what he'll discover when Detective Santos arrives at Mom's house during his welcome home party, is that I finally understand the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge would have been letting him die in this hospital bed, taking my pound of flesh in secret while he was helpless. Justice is watching him get arrested in front of his congregation, seeing Mom's face when she hears the recording, knowing that every person who called his survival a miracle will learn exactly what kind of man they've been praying for. Richard Clemens survived his coma. He won't survive what comes next. And for the first time in 20 years, I hope he lives a very, very long life, every day of it behind bars, where men like him get exactly what they deserve.